Our speaker tonight is Camille Seaman. Born in Long Island, she is of Shinnecock, Montaukett, African American and Italian ancestry. She was raised to celebrate the interconnection of humans and the environment. This way of seeing shapes her approach to photography today. She has traveled from Alaska to the Antarctic Circle, photographing the landscape and its inhabitants. Over the last 2 decades, she has documented the effects of climate change on the Earth's polar regions. She studied photography with Jan Groover and drawing with John Cohen at SUNY Purchase. She has workshopped with Steve McCurry, Sebastião Salgado, and Paul Fusco. Her photographs have been published in National Geographic Magazine, Italian Geo, German Geo, Time, the New York Times Sunday Magazine, Newsweek, Outside, Zeitwissen, Men's Journal, Seed, Camera Arts, Issues, Photo District News, and American Photo, among many others. Her photographs have received many awards, including a National Geographic Award and the Critical Mass Top Monograph Award. She's a TED Senior Fellow, Stanford Knight Fellow, Cinereach Filmmaker in Residence Fellow, National Geographic Contributing Photographer, and the Artist in Residence at Denali National Park in 2015. Her published works include The Big Cloud, spectacular photographs of storm clouds, Melting Away, a 10-year journey through our endangered polar regions, and The Last Iceberg. Camille, she's a photographer. She also beads, she knits, she works with wood, and she's an absolutely lovely person to have a talk with. So please help me give a warm welcome to the guest juror of Alaska Positive 2023, Camille Seaman.
Hello. Are you ready? I am not good at speaking behind podiums. How do I look? Can you find me on the camera? Yes. Okay, great. And to those of you on Zoom, thank you. I feel very privileged. I came a very long way to share this story with you. But I wanted to start because I've been thinking a lot recently about the new discoveries made by the James Webb telescope. And I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to that, but it's mind-blowing, the discoveries. It's actually game-changing, because what they're starting to question is our idea of the Big Bang. And the galaxies that they've been able to observe are so old that they couldn't possibly align with this idea of the Big Bang. So I started to think about who we are and what we are and where we are. And I know many of you probably are wearing gold and silver and platinum. How many of you have metals on your body or in your body? Gold, silver, all of these things were forged in exploding supernovas of stars much larger than our own sun, and delivered through space to our planet. We are wearing these artifacts of these incredible events. We ourselves are artifacts of these incredible events. And so I always bring that up as our starting point to remind us that we are literally children of the stars. We are solar creatures. And I think so often we lose sight of the miracle that we are. And we get so caught up in the craziness of our macro world that we forget that beautiful, simple truth. And so I wanted to start there before I talk about how I found my connection and purpose. So I always feel like I need to start by giving orientation of where I'm from. And this is Long Island in New York. You notice I said Long Island. If I were still living on Long Island, you would know. But I was actually born in Huntington Hospital, which is over here in Suffolk County. But my tribal heritage of my grandfather and his family is actually out here in Montaukett, and this is Shinnecock Bay, Shinnecock Hills. And so this is where I learned to see the world the way that I do. And that started because of my grandparents. So this is my Nana and my grandpa, and they are holding what was their oldest daughter. She is now the matriarch of our family. She has just turned 81 this week, actually. And so my grandfather thought it was really important that all of us know what it meant to be a good human being. And for him, that meant us knowing that we were all interconnected and interrelated, not just to everyone, but everything. And so as a small child, this is me. I was born in 1969, and I was named for Hurricane Camille. Be careful what you name your children. I think I still look the same. I just need a little beret. But as a small child, my grandfather would take me into the woods around our house, and he would stop and introduce me to each tree. He would have me put my hands on the tree, and he'd say, "Listen." And you could feel the tree, bending slightly in the breeze if there was a breeze. And he'd say, "This is your relative in the same way that I am your relative, and you must respect it." He would take me to each tree. And this had this great side effect of me never being lost, because I recognized their individual faces the way I would recognize yours. One day, he caught me, as small children do, pulling leaves off of a branch. And he said, "You think you can do what you want to that tree without any consequences?" He said, "If you think that you're separate from that tree, see how long you could hold your breath." And then he would make me hold my breath. Every day from the age of 5 until he died when I was 13, he made me sit outside every day, whether it was raining, snowing, hot, or cold, for 1 hour. One of my favorite places to sit was on this rock, this boulder, that was probably placed there by the last ice age. And I was not allowed to move more than the distance of my arms. And after an hour, he would call me into the house and he would say, "What did you see?" And if I was feeling stubborn, I would be like, "Grandpa, I didn't see anything." He'd be like, "Go back outside." So what was great was he was giving me a very precious gift. He was teaching me how to be still and observe. He was teaching me how to notice things in my environment, but he was also giving me the gift of knowing that this idea that we are separate from nature is an illusion. And when you are sat still for any amount of time, you feel that veil, that illusory veil, to just disintegrate. And that's when magical things happen. Butterflies land on you, birds come close to you. And it's because they go, "Oh, you're back. You remember. You are not separate." That interconnection. The other thing that was given to me is, I would say, "Grandpa, I saw a spider building a web," and he would say, "No rain today." Or I'd say, "Grandpa, I saw these clouds that were like this." He said, "Rain in 24 hours. So he was also helping me to interpret my environment. As a photographer, that was gold. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't always appreciate it, but it was an incredible gift. My tribe is matriarchal. That means the women are the ones that we look to for the wisdom, for the decision making. It does not mean that the men have no power. It just means that they default to the wisdom and knowing of the women. And so as a young, your left ear is hitting the Hold on. That was really well done. Thank you, Chris. No, technical difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you for rolling with it.
Being matriarchal, that meant we as girl children in our family were encouraged to do and be leaders. We were not taught to, I don't even know the word for it. I witnessed it in school where, for example, for sports, when picking teams for kickball, the girls would sort of linger by the side. We were not taught to do that. We were taught to stand forward if that's what you wanted. And so I wanted to play baseball, not softball. I wanted to play with the boys. And so it turned out I was the 13th girl in the United States to play on an all-boy team. As a small child, I'm going to move around a bit. Hopefully that won't mess the cameras up. Are we good? As a small child, I was the odd one. And I remember sometimes overhearing my aunts going, "Oh, that Camille, I wonder what's going to become of her." They didn't know what to do with me. And one day, an aunt came to visit at our house, and she found me in my bedroom closet drawing on the wall. A few hours later, she found me under the dining room table, drawing on the underside of the table. And finally, she just looked at my mom and she said, "Why don't you give that girl some paper?" So they gave me paper, and I discovered my first superpower, which was drawing. And after a few years, that same aunt came back, and she said, "You know, she's really good. She should go to the Fame High School in Manhattan." And so I did. This is a little bit of foreshadowing. You can see in my hand the camera. Going to that school was an incredible gift, but it came at a cost. By going back into New York City where my mom had grown up, I should also say my mom is Black and Italian. She grew up in Harlem. And when she moved to Long Island, she thought she had escaped that. And here I was pulling her back. And so in the city, it was challenging, our relationship. But that school was a gift. Every week we were required to go to the major museums and look at the art, study the painting, look at the drawings. And we even had access to many private collections, things that most people wouldn't ever get to see. And we had full access to that. So I was being visually trained by some of the best art on the planet. And things at home weren't so good. Things got so bad that, I'll be honest, it was, I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt her. And I decided it was best to leave home. So at the age of 15, I left, and I was sleeping on friends' couches. It wasn't until recently that I acknowledged that I was actually homeless, that I was living on friends' couches in order to stay in school. And one of the jobs that I had was working as a New York City bike messenger. The school recognized that I was at risk of falling through the cracks. And so they gave me a film camera, and they said, "Go out and photograph your experience." They took away the manual. They said, "You have to figure out how to use the camera." But they taught me how to bulk load black and white film. And so many of the pictures, you can see I was quite an angry young person. Many of the pictures I made of that time were of me and my friends in New York and the adventures or misadventures that we would get involved in. I also worked in a 1-hour photo lab. A lot of people don't know that we actually, do you remember film? We had to look at each individual frame. So being a 1-hour lab technician in Manhattan was quite an education. I saw many things. But it was also great because I had free use of this, and I could do color film. All of this happening, I never thought that I could actually be a photographer. No one came to my school and said, you know, you can do this. Nobody that I saw doing it looked like me. And that's why representation is important. If we see people that look like us doing things, then we know, oh, maybe we can do that, especially for children. This was my high school yearbook quote. Wow, look at that turtle go. And I had no idea how actually prescient it would be for how my life would go. I left high school, went on to university at the State University of New York in Purchase. And while I was there, one of my teachers, John Cohen, are any of you Grateful Dead fans? Do you know the song about Uncle John's band? Well, that was about John Cohen. And John Cohen had a band called the New Lost City Ramblers. He was an amazing musician, photographer, filmmaker, artist. He was one of those guys. But for me, he was my drawing teacher. And we would sit out in the fields of Westchester, and he would tell me stories about this time he was in the Andes with the Peruvian people and the stories of the tribes he met. And I remembered, yes, I have that. I know that. And so he encouraged me to do my beadwork again, to reconnect with my tribal identity. And so I did. I started doing beadwork, and I really thought, this is why I was put on the planet. When I graduated from university, I moved to California, and I was doing beadwork 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, and I had galleries selling the work all over the country. I was very happy doing it. It was really, I really thought this was my purpose. And one day, after a few years of doing this, I woke up and my hand felt like it was on fire. And I went to the doctor and they said, you have Decravane's tendinitis. You have 3 options. You can rest it, you can do cortisone shots, or you can have surgery. And I decided to take first, let's try and rest it first. I have this in here just to say I also was a surfer. When I left home at 15, I was very lucky because I had that intense moment of pain and anger and sadness to say, what is it that makes me happy? And at 15, I knew the answer. I like making things, I like traveling, and I like being outside. And I knew that's what I wanted to make my life. I didn't have any parents to say, you should do this, or you need to go to college, or you need to get this job, or I didn't have that guidance. And I understood that I, at the age of 15, was the author of my life. I get to write what happens. I get to write who I want to be and where I go and what is possible and what isn't possible. And in many ways, that was a gift. The pain of leaving home, I have to say, looking back, the camera saved my life. It gave me something positive and creative to do in a time when I was very angry, very dark, very lost. And so surfing was one of the many adventures I had. Just tangentially, I surfed in California, I surfed in Mexico, I surfed in Hawaii, I surfed Fiji, I surfed New Zealand and Australia. I almost died in Fiji, and that kind of tarnished everything, but that's another story. So fast forward, it's 1999, and I'm sitting on the couch, and my wrist is injured. I'm resting. And my partner, he says, I have to go to Los Angeles for a business meeting. Why don't you come? And I said, okay. So we're in Oakland Airport waiting for the 1-hour flight to Los Angeles when they announced that they've oversold the flight and they'll give a free round-trip ticket to anyone who gives up their seat and waits just 1 hour for the next flight. I was like, I can do that. If someone had come up to me and said, if you give up this seat, you are going to end up at the ends of the earth and chasing tornadoes, I would never have believed that just this one simple act was going to change the course of my life. I wonder if I would have given it up, because, we all make plans. And what does the universe say to our plans? Ha ha ha. So I've learned to embrace goals over plans. Have a goal. So I gave up my seat, and then I decided to go to this place in Kotzebue, in Alaska. Turns out it was Alaska Airlines that had oversold the flight. And I specifically chose Kotzebue because it was situated on the supposed Bering Land Bridge. And I was always perplexed by the idea that my tribe, the people in my tribe, were on the very eastern tip of Long Island. Like, you almost couldn't, the next stop is the Atlantic Ocean. That was it. So it's this theory that we walked across this ice bridge and we just kept walking and walking, and we were like, this looks good. We're at the end of the land. Let's stay here. I was perplexed by this. And I wanted to explore that myself. And so I used that ticket to go to Kotzebue because I wanted to see what it felt like to walk across the frozen sea ice. I had never been up here. In fact, part of the reason I had moved from New York to California was to escape the weather. It was too cold, too hot. California was much more moderate, and yet here was this free ticket to Alaska. So I did. I went up to Alaska after doing a bit of research. I decided to come in the first week of March, knowing that it would still be cold, the ice would be there, but the sun had returned. And what I didn't know is Alaska Airlines is notorious for losing your luggage. And so I made the rookie mistake, I will never do it, I have never done it, of checking all my warm clothes in that bag. And so when I arrived in Kotzebue and it was minus 35, I was literally just wearing a polar fleece jacket and some slip-on shoes, nothing warm. And I walked into the Quonset hut, which was the airport, and they said, don't worry, when your stuff comes, we'll get it to you. And I was like, it's minus 35. So they were like, we got you. And so they outfitted me completely in sealskin, parka, hat, gloves, everything. And then I set out onto the ice. I'm missing pictures. So you're gonna have to believe me. Because I had pictures of me coming out on the ice. So I'll pause here and say to all of you, have courage. And this is one of my favorite quotes by Rumi, the Sufi poet. Just because you cannot see the path does not mean you're not on it. And so they outfitted me completely, sealskin, parka, hat, gloves. This was a bobcat hat, I believe. Oh, I did find it. It's okay. They're not in order, but we're going to make it work. And so I set out onto the ice. And as I walked, I thought, this is totally safe. There were twigs in the ice marking a path. And I was like, there's even a path. I just was walking out on the ice. It was amazing because it was so cold and everything was covered. And it was like squeaky. And I was like, this is like my extraterrestrial, woo! I'm walking on this alien world, but it's my world. And I was walking the twigs, and every 10 minutes or so, someone on a snowmobile would come up, and they'd be like, are you okay? And I'd say, yeah, I'm just going for a walk. And they'd be like, okay. So I kept walking. And after an hour or so, the twigs stopped, the traffic stopped, and I kept walking away from the town. And first, okay, I'm going to pause, time out. Nowhere in my mind did I actually think I was going to walk to Russia or anything like that. In my mind, this was the naive error. I thought I could walk on the frozen solid ice, and then it would just end, and there would be sea. And I wanted to get there, to the end of the ice and look at the sea. And after an hour of walking by myself, just away from the town, 2 snowmobiles pulled up, and a Inupiat man and a Russian woman. And they asked me a different question. They said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm trying to get to where the ice ends and the sea begins." And they said, "That's like 22 miles. And I was like, "Oh, I can't walk that." I didn't have any supplies, no water, no shelter, just what I was wearing and my camera inside that parka. And they said, "Well, we're going that way." They were going ice fishing, but they weren't coming back. I'd be happy to give me a ride. And then suddenly I heard my grandfather. "When a door opens, even if it's not one that you planned, walk through it. There'll be great teaching there." So I was like, okay, Grandpa says get on the back. So I got on the back with the man, and off we went. I had never been on a snowmobile before. I had no idea they go so fast. And so we're going over the ice, zoom, 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 60 miles an hour, zoom, zoom, zoom. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. And then after a few minutes, I start doing the math, and I'm like, whoa, stop, because I have to walk this back. And so they did. They let me off. And I remember watching them just go until they disappeared into the white. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And then I turned around to look for the town, and it was gone. All around me in every direction was just ice, and I thought, this is not good. So I decided in that moment, in the great wisdom, to turn around and follow the snowmobile tracks before they blew away. And as I walked back on that ice, it took me over 5 hours before I reached the town. But as I walked back, all of my grandfather's teachings, I felt in a very physical way, where I understood for the first time in a very physical way that I was standing on my rock in space, that I was made of the material of this planet, that I am of this earth. I am an earthling. And that was quite special, to really feel that this is my rock in space. And this awakening as an earthling came in tandem with me discovering when I got back that as I had walked on the ice, I was 3 weeks pregnant with my daughter. So this awakening became in tandem with me awakening as a mother. So I thought that was it. I had done cold. And now I was a mom. And this is my daughter, Tala, when she was 2 days old. And my mother-in-law had other ideas. She was fascinated by this idea that I had met my planet. And so she decided at the age of 80 to go on a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker to the actual geographic North Pole. She wanted to see what I had experienced. And when she came back, she said she too understood. She was standing on her rock in space, and she had to write a book about it. And I was like, no, I'm done. I was cold, that was enough. But, a woman who goes on a Russian icebreaker to the North Pole is a formidable force. And so we went to Svalbard. As a photographer, how many of you are photographers or do photography, make images? Just a few. I always say, find your voice. All of us have beginnings. And my beginning was as a mother photographing her child. This is, I was really lucky. Her father is an inventor, and he sold his inventions all over the world. So we would travel as a family, and while he was in meetings, I would be photographing my daughter in these places. But when it was time to go to Svalbard, that was after 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, I remember holding my daughter as the second plane hit. And I thought, she will never know those buildings in the way that I had. I had worked as a New York City bike messenger, delivering things to those buildings, except for in a photograph or film. I understood for the first time the importance of a photograph as a historic document, as proof of our existence. And so when we went to Svalbard, 20 years this summer, that was my anniversary, that switch had come on. I understood that I wanted to show that there was something beautiful about this planet and this life. When we attacked Afghanistan, I remember sitting on my couch in Berkeley, California, thinking, this is going the wrong way. This is so dark. This is so cynical. What can I do? And I remember thinking quite pathetically, the only thing I know how to do is make pretty pictures. And so when we went to Svalbard, that switch had come on, and I had with me 5 different formats of camera. This was with a 4x5 where you put the cloth over your head. The other one was with the square camera where you look down. And photographing there was so beautiful, so amazing. Seeing the ice, we were on a small little icebreaker, that we decided we would take my mother-in-law to Antarctica as a thank you. But in between that, because this switch had come on, I really thought I was going to be a people photographer, a culture photographer. This was in the Darien Gap in Panama. This was in Tibet. So if you want something, inevitably you're going to have to do the work. But if you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. I often advise young people, if you're trying to figure out what it is your superpower and where it is you should place your energy, think of the things that you do where you lose track of time. When you're doing something, you're like, oh, wow, I've been doing this for 6 hours. That's a signal that you should do more of that, because it won't feel like work. So this is me working in East Greenland. After going to Antarctica, I was awarded a National Geographic Award in 2006. And that got me invited on an expedition to the Ross Sea. And on that trip, there was a Russian expedition photographer who every day he was like, how are you doing that? What are you doing? And I love sharing, I love teaching, and he said, you should have this job. So I got hired working as the expedition photographer, first on Russian ships, then on Norwegian ships, then on other ships, which meant that I was getting paid to be in these remarkable places. This is East Greenland. And I'll be honest, when I first started going to these places, I didn't know what climate change was. I didn't know. And I was more interested in showing how beautiful our planet was. I had no idea that I was slowly documenting what we were losing. This is from that Russian expedition. We had helicopters, and so we were able to actually take these helicopters, and we would land on on ice shelves, and be standing on 200 plus feet of ice above the sea. Can you see the penguins? So for me, light has always been the thing that moves me. I'm always looking for a special quality of light. If you don't feel something when you see my images, then I have failed. It is not enough to just give you information. I want you to feel what it feels like to be in these places. This picture, I'll pause here, is still quite important to me. It was one of the first images that I had published in National Geographic as part of their special water issue. But more important, it was Christmas Day. 2006. And my daughter's birthday is in December. And it was yet another birthday of hers that I was missing. And I remember before I was leaving to go to Antarctica, I said, maybe I shouldn't go. I was feeling kind of guilt, like this is another birthday I'm missing. Maybe I should stay here. And she, at the age of just turning 7, she was just turning 7, she said, Mom, you have to go. I said, what do you mean? She said, Mom, you have to go. I said, why do I have to go? She said, because it makes you happy. And I said, yes. And she said, besides, if you don't go, you'll drive us crazy. So I went, and, I acknowledged the sacrifice, the hard work that it is to raise a child when I'm away for a month or 2 at a time. And I acknowledge that, and I honor that by doing the best work that I can. And this is one of those images. So in 2007, the UN announced that climate change was happening, and my phone started ringing. My career just went, phew, and I'm very grateful for that. My friends had told me, they said, your images are pretty good. You should try and get them in the cafe. And I said, I don't see them in the cafe. And they said, well, that's how you get into a gallery. You got to work your way up. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I have this picture of where they are, and it's not there. And they said, well, how are you're never going to get anywhere. And I swear, like 3 days later, the phone rang, and a guy with a really deep voice was like, hello, I'm the curator from the National Academy of Sciences Museum in Washington. I was like, who is this? I thought it was my friends pranking me. It was the curator from this museum in Washington, D.C., and he said, I'd like to come visit you and look at your work. And so he flew out, looked at my work, and he said, I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition in our museum. And I said, but I've never shown my work anywhere, not even in a cafe. And he said, doesn't matter, it needs to be seen. And so months later, they flew me and my family to D.C. for the opening in this amazing historic museum across from the Lincoln Memorial. And when I had that vision of where my images were, it was always a place that had white marble floors. And I walked into the exhibition for the first time, and it was white marble floors. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be realistic. If that's your thing, be realistic. But if you have a vision, honor that vision. Trust that your work that you've done should be where you see it, and hold fast to that. The flip side of that is all these magazines were interviewing me. So you got this amazing work, and what's next? And I don't know. I don't work that way. I go with what I feel. And so I really started freaking out, like, what if this is all I have, and I'm a one-trick pony, and I'm all washed up? And my daughter, again, her infinite wisdom, at the age of 8 now, sitting on our couch in Berkeley watching Storm Chasers on the Nat Geo channel. And I'm vacuuming, and I go, what is that? This color, this light. And she saw me like trying to look sideways into the TV. And she said, Mom, you should do that. I said, yeah, I should. And her dad said, well, why don't you go Google it? So during a commercial break, I Googled storm chasing. And this whole world appeared to me that 30 seconds ago didn't exist, where you can pay someone to drive you really fast in bad weather. And I was like, wow, this one site really stood out. It had like lightning flashes across the screen and thunder noises, and I was like, I recognize passion. I want to go with that guy. And all of his trips were fully booked. And I said, oh, that's too bad. This was 2008. So I sent him an email. I'm really interested in doing this. Please let me know if anybody cancels. A half an hour later, bing, you've got mail. That was those days. And he says, can you be here in 3 days? I just had someone cancel. So 3 days after my daughter said, Mom, you should do that, I did. And this is a little 30-second video of some of that and what it is. Who wants to go storm chasing? So I did it for 8 years. After that first trip, I said to the guy, "This is amazing. If anybody else cancels, let me know." He said, "Well, can you drive?" And it just so happened I had a 15-passenger commercial driver's license. He said, "You're hired." So then I was getting paid to chase storms and drive people through bad weather. But honestly, this experience was some of the most intensely beautiful. It was this particular one was the first time where I was like, I didn't even know where to point the camera. I was just so like, I was so overwhelmed by the beauty that is the power of these storms. That's true power. And this is the same forces, this swirl force, this vortex, is the same force that governs our planets, our solar systems, our galaxies. And it was amazing to witness that firsthand, to smell that and feel that. There's me working. You could say I was blown away by storm chasing. So when I wasn't storm chasing, because I did that for 8 years, in the summer I was storm chasing, and in our summer, high summer, I would be up in the Arctic, and in our winter, I'd be down in Antarctica. So after 2011, I came home, and I was a little, being and seeing so many polar bears, like too close, I started to have anxiety dreams. And I never wanted to be the reason that we had to kill a bear, because I was in his land, wanting to make photos. And I also noticed that as much as I enjoyed being published and shown and exhibited, that we weren't listening, we weren't paying attention. I'd come home and I'd say, "This is what I'm seeing, this is what's happening, this is what our climate scientists that I'm working next to are saying," and nobody is listening, nobody is moving. And I became so depressed that particular year because a 17-year-old British boy was killed by a polar bear. So they then had to destroy that bear. And I came home and I just said to my daughter, who is now 11, I said, "Look," from my bed, I was that depressed. I said, "Look, just promise me you won't have any kids, and we'll just have a good life, and that's it." And 11, in her wisdom, she said, "Mom, I can't promise you anything. I'm 11. And she said, "Besides, you have to try." She was right. And so that's when I became a TED Fellow, where they taught me how to speak. They gave me the opportunity to present to global audiences. But that even still wasn't enough, so I became a Stanford Knight Fellow. And at Stanford, so I basically got paid to go to Stanford and take all the classes where I felt like I need to shore myself up, like writing. That became my book, Melting Away. I wrote that. I did video work there. I did Tai Chi. But something was really bothering me, because I kept hearing this idea like that most second graders in the United States, when polled, asked if there were still Native Americans, they said no. And I was like, what are you talking about? We are still here. We may not look the way you think we should look. We may not always be in regalia or feathers or leather, but we are here. And we are an adaptive and evolving culture. We are not meant to be in a jar, unchanging. And so I started this series called We Are Still Here, where I would travel around. This is someone from my tribe, and these tattoo markings are very much in our tradition. And then while I was out photographing in Rosebud, we heard this call from Standing Rock. And so every part of my body knew I needed to go there and document what was happening. And so these are just a few images from that. I am not a conflict photographer. I think because of certain events in my childhood, I cannot be near this kind of violence. I cannot stand by and watch other people be harmed. So this was the last photo I made because I had to go to Antarctica. And yeah, we all know how that turned out. So I put this: honor your gift, honor it. And that means don't keep it in a shoebox under your bed. Do everything you can to make sure it gets seen. Keep doing it. These are more recent pictures in Antarctica. And I love this one because I swear to you, I am dumbfounded. I really want to know, where are they going? and this is on an iceberg in the middle of a very windy sea. And I'm like, where are they going? Are they going up so they can slide down? I really wanted to know. I still want to know. And then in 2016, this happened. And I had never seen, in all of my years of going to Antarctica, anything like this. And it was one of those events where I had to keep taking the camera from my face and going, am I really seeing this? And it lasted for about 4 hours, and it went from oranges to reds to purples. And this became my first Nat Geo cover in 2017. And people, it was really cool. They were sending me different languages from all over the world, so I had them. It had a huge, profound impact in my family. So I told you I was the weird one. Now I'm the wise one. Oh, well, you see what your cousin Camille did. If she can do it, she was homeless, if she can get through college, you can do it. And if she can, you can do it. And they're all like, oh, that's my cousin. Oh, that's my niece, So it had a huge impact. Just during the pandemic, Facebook, now called Meta, reached out to me and commissioned this piece for their lobby. It is 15 feet high by 140 feet around, and that basically paid for my house. This is what it looks like all together. And then I'm just going to show you a last few images. These are from last year. I'm going back in 2 weeks. This is Antarctica. This is our planet, ours, our heritage. We are part of this. And what happens in the polar regions is connected to what happens here, and vice versa. It is all interconnected. When I first started photographing ice, I had my grandfather's words in my head: these are your relatives. The water is my relative. And so when I'm photographing icebergs, I'm thinking, how many ancestors' water is this? This really beautiful thing happens right around the Antarctic Circle, just above it, where around the solstice, which is December 21st, 22nd, you get 3 to 4 hours of sunset colors going behind that little island. And then you get 3 to 4 hours of sunrise colors. And if conditions are perfect like this, it feels surreal. It feels like a dream. This is in the Weddell Sea. And it's one of those places where you're like running around. I'm on a ship, and I'm running around like the light's over here, and then I go running around over here because it's a total different color on this side. And it just keeps going. It's pretty rare to see the moon in Antarctica, but when you do, like, it's pretty epic. I will intermission with this lovely quote by Maya Angelou. A bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. Each one of us has a superpower. We don't need to know what it's supposed to do. We just need to do it. Last year, this is up in the Arctic, I went very early, too early, it was bloody cold. It was minus 37. And I went dog sledding. And then I met this guy. It's early, and that ice should be solid. I watched him fall through the ice about 17 times. As he was making his way, I will say, okay, I have to back up a little. Hashtag keep it real. It was the first time I had ever seen polar bears mating in my life. And it was quite a sight. And I'm sure you know that the female is half the size of the male. I had always known that, but I'd never actually physically seen the difference until this day. Her being half the size, she can walk on this thin ice to get away from him. And he's chasing after her, still in love, and falling all the way through. This is in Svalbard also, and these are Svalbard reindeer, much smaller and shorter than the caribou that you find in Alaska. This was this summer. This summer was really, really hard for me. The melting is, it's real. And, you know, if I had made this picture in 2002, you would have seen not just hundreds of these kittiwakes, but thousands. They have declined in the last 5 years by 97%. Here is what's left of a glacier. You can see all this new exposed rock. That's in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, if I showed you this picture, it would have been covered. Now, no. But it's still beautiful. Our planet is still beautiful. So on the right, I made that image in 2009. The same glacier, same aspect this year. And I never in my wildest dreams thought that it would happen that quickly. I thought it would 25, 50, 100 years. They were saying, no, it's happening now. This was this summer. And this guy, this is our lover. I sometimes more and more am doing more video, and so it just doesn't have sound, but you can really get a sense of his size here. So he's trying not to fall through the ice. You can see it flexing like a waterbed. But he has a technique. And I wasn't so worried about him because he looks very good, very healthy, very round. Look how he spreads his weight out. Pretty amazing. And so I'll end with the last things that my grandfather told me before he died. He called me in and he said, "You are billions of years in the making, and there is no one like you. You are born of this time for this time, and you carry all of your ancestors with you. You can access them at any time. You have survived slavery, genocide, and disease. Yet here you are. Your job is to do what you do like no one else can on the planet, and do that in service to each other. In other words, be a good ancestor." Inevitably, I try to always end here, and I take your questions, and people go, what about your daughter? So I have added this bit on being a mother. Don't feel bad for her. From the age of 2 weeks, I traveled with her all over the planet. She has been on all 7 continents before she was 7. She has been in over 100 countries. At the age of 3, she was making snow angels on the frozen Arctic Ocean. She turned 5 in Antarctica, being stalked by chinstrap penguins. Age of 6 in East Greenland, she created a new Olympic sport called naked Barbie cliff diving, in which she would launch her naked Barbies off of the rocks into the water. It was beautiful to watch her making houses for her Barbies out of whale bones. At the age of 17, her first ever job was working in Antarctica as Penguin Highway Patrol. She was not telling the penguins to stop, she was telling the people that the penguins have the right of way. And in 2022, she graduated from Stanford. And right now she's finishing her master's also at Stanford. So don't worry about her, she's good. Oh, I should end. This summer, she came and visited me in Denmark, and she asked to borrow my cameras. And I was like, oh no! So, you never know. So, from my heart to Bhutne, thank you. So, do we have questions?
So folks, for those who are on Zoom, I think this is on, if there's any questions, if you could put in the Q&A, and Adriana's going to manage that. And if anybody else has questions, I'll bring you the mic.
Thank you. I think it's on the booth.
Hey, Glenn? Give me just
There we go.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing all that with us. I'm interested in in your perception of the increased level of tourism to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Have you seen that, and how sustainable do you think that is, and what's kind of your take on the tourism impact to Antarctica?
That's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. When I first started going to Antarctica in the early 2000s, I wouldn't see another ship the whole time. And just before the pandemic, there were about 25 ships operating, which felt crowded. We would see people. And after the pandemic, or I should say during the pandemic, those companies each built 2 and 3 more ships. So now, this year, it's 70-something ships in Antarctica. That's crowded. Studies have shown that it's not making an impact on penguin population as far as their behavior. And seriously, penguins are like, whatevs. They come up to you and they're like, hey, what you doing? Okay. And they're really, it doesn't affect them. They are so purpose-driven to reproduce, raise those eggs, that we're not interfering with that. I wonder, there have been talks about limiting the sites that ships can go to. There are already rules in place that govern behavior of people on sites, what parts of a site they can go to, what parts of the site they can't go to. If a ship has over this many people, how many people on land at a time, things like that. I feel personally conflicted about it. I have said basically that after 2025, I won't go back to Antarctica. I don't feel that I can add much more to what I have been able to. But it's something I think of. Everyone who works down there, the thing we like to say or think is that it's very difficult to protect something that you don't love. And it's very difficult to love something you don't know. And so that exposure, sometimes that physical exposure to the place, is necessary to make that connection. However, the majority, and I'm being honest, the majority of people that I have seen come down there are bucket list, seventh continent, or they are what is now being termed as doomsday tourism, where they want to see it before it's gone. And that is not helpful, that's not effective. And so I think people like me and others that work on these ships, when we have this, we work really hard to make a soul connection and to even, checklist. But I'll be honest, it wasn't the first time. There was a guy we had on the ship, and he wouldn't get off anywhere until we got to the actual physical continent. He wasn't interested in the islands, the penguins, the lectures, nothing. It was about stepping foot on the continent. So, okay, we got to the continent. He came ashore. He stood there for 10 minutes, and that was it. He got back on, and that's sad to me. That lack of curiosity, that lack of wonder and awe for the sake of a bragging right, and quite honestly, so many of us have been to incredible places, and it's a bragging right. It's a status thing. Oh, we were in Antarctica last, So it's complex, but I do hope that if I can touch even 1% of those people when they go home to actually consider their grandchildren and their grandchildren's children and how it all links together, I can only try. But thank you for asking that.
Jackie, we've got a question from Zoom. All right. So can you make a few comments on juring the Alaska Positive and the work submitted?
Say that again?
Yeah. So can you make a few comments on juring the Alaska
Okay.
Positive and the work submitted?
So I was asked to come and jury the submissions for the Alaska Positive exhibition that will open on December 1st, right? And I'd never done that before. I have been a judge, for example, for a National Geographic photo competition, where I had to look at 10,000 images. And the same things applied here, where I was not interested in seeing a pretty picture that I already knew. I wanted to see things, even if I thought I knew what it was, I hadn't seen before. I tell this quite often to aspiring photographers. National Geographic is not interested in the fact that you can make an image like I do. They call me. They're not interested in you doing like a David Duboulet, half above the water, half below. They call David Duboulet. But what we haven't seen is your unique perspective, how you see the world. And that's what I looked for. I looked for images that showed me something in a way that made me stop, made me stay a little longer, told a story in a way that I hadn't considered before. So I hope that helps. Any other questions? You're all so shy. Speechless? Should I play the video? She wants the video, okay. I hope I can find it. I might need to call Clint.
Oh, Thomas.
How do I make it full?
Just double click on the picture. It should go full size.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Just a note about that rolling iceberg. That was real time, not slowed or anything. It just very gracefully rolled. And I don't know if you noticed, but the boat was, its wake is what was enough to tip it. And it was making beautiful noises as it was happening, but I can't play it because it was me going, "Whoa!" as it was happening. So, yeah. I've seen icebergs roll a few times, but I'm not always so quick to be able to video it. So, I hope this has been helpful for you. I have to say, I acknowledge that my real job, the pictures are nice, but my real job is to inspire you. My real job is to breathe air to your fire and give you the inspiration to do what you are supposed to do so that we can fix this. Yeah. So, good luck. Thank you.